Hey guys, it's Jessica. Today we are going to be looking at the new fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, and horror releases coming out in July that I think you should keep an eye on. We are going to be going in chronological order. I am going to include in this list, I have fantasy, sci-fi, horror, and a little bit of mystery. I don't think that there are quite as many books that I'm excited about this month compared to last month and looking ahead to August, because August looks like another fantastic month for me. But I did find some that I thought looked really intriguing. So let's go ahead and get started with July 1st. And the first book that I found is called Grave Birds, and it's by Dana Emmendorf. And the description says that you should think of it as the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires crossed with Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, two books which I really love. And reading the description, I also got a little bit of a Witches of Eastwick vibe. So we're going to start out with, what is a grave bird? A grave bird is a bird that haunts the cemeteries of Hawthorne, South Carolina, where Spanish moss drips from the trees and Southern charm is imbued with lies. Hollis Sutherland never knew these unique birds existed, not until she died and was brought back to life. When a mysterious, charming bachelor makes his way into town and strange things start happening, who is this mysterious stranger? I guarantee you that Hollis is going to find out, right? I read the first chapter of this. It is up anywhere you buy your books. They're going to have the sample chapter of this book now. And it definitely has that kind of dark, Southern Gothic charm. You can really just almost feel, the humidity from what I read in that first chapter. So I think it sounds really interesting. It's not necessarily the kind of thing that I usually read. And in terms of like, what genre is this? It's categorized as fantasy. It sounds a little bit more like a fantasy horror novel to me, but I don't know how dark it gets. But anyway, I'm going to be keeping my eyes on this, and this might be something that I'm going to get to at some point. I don't think it's going to be on my July TBR because I feel like I need to know more, but definitely an intriguing premise. And then also coming on July 1st, there's going to be a ton here. We have A Forbidden Alchemy by Stacy McEwan. This is a romantasy by the author of the Ledge trilogy, and I've never read those books or anything by this author, and I am, as you all know, not really a romantasy reader. I like a romance in a book, sure, but I don't necessarily love a book that's just romance. So I have heard that her books are a pretty good balance of the two and that they're good for people who aren't necessarily heavy romantasy readers. So I am intrigued by this one. And let me tell you what it is about. Nina Harrow and Patrick Coulson are 12 years old when they are whisked away from the shadows of their mining towns to dazzling Bellavere City to discover their magical potential. So basically, magical school. And they're there to try to become what it says is artisans. And then they uncover a devastating truth. Artisans aren't born, they're chosen. They part ways on very different paths, leaving them to carry the burden of this secret alone. And then I think there's a lot of political intrigue in this one. The description gives away a lot. That's where I'm going to stop. I don't know if you necessarily need to read the whole thing to get an idea of what it's about, but I'm just really curious for any of you who have read her first trilogy to tell me what you thought. And in particular, tell me if you think that I would like this book, because I did read a little bit of the sample of it and it did sound pretty good to me. But again, I am picky with my romance in my fantasy books. So just let me know if you have any thoughts, but it's one that I am right now planning on trying in July. And also the last book I have on July 1st is called Infinite Archive. It is by Muir Lafferty. This is the third book in her sci-fi mystery series. The first one is Station Eternity. And I don't really know that much about this third book. I have read the first book. I actually did DNF the first book because I felt like it was not the mood that I was in the month that I read it. But this one has cats on the cover. I don't know why. I don't know if they're cats. The description doesn't say anything about there being cats in the story, but there are cats all over the cover. So color me intrigued. Maybe I'm going to read it. Usually with mystery series, you don't necessarily have to read them all in order. So maybe I'm going to give it a try. We'll see. Anyway, this series follows Mallory, who is a mystery book writer. and amateur sleuth in the sense that murders just seem to keep happening around her. It's so weird. It's quite funny, very self-aware, a lot of kind of hilarious aliens, things like that. Now I'm feeling like I need to go back and finish that first book, right? I'm talking myself into it, I think. But anyway, so this one's coming out on July 1st. So if you're interested, if you've been reading the series, or if you'd like to give the series a try, there is a third volume coming out July 1st. Okay, moving on to July 8th, we have The Frozen People by Ellie Griffiths. This is a science fiction mystery, and it's written by an author who I think is primarily a mystery writer. And I have been very into sci-fi mysteries and fantasy mysteries lately, so when I saw this one pop up and I saw that it involved time travel, I was very intrigued, and it's one that I am interested in reading. Again, I've never read anything by this author, so I have no idea if it's something I'm going to enjoy or not, but the premise sounds really interesting. And it is about Allie Dawson, who leads a cold case investigation team. And the joke is that their crimes are so old, they're frozen, but her team has a secret. And the secret is that they can go back in time to find evidence on these crimes. And that is an amazing premise. I am so into that idea. That's just like, I read that and I was like, oh, yes, that sounds so good. So naturally, there's going to be some unexpected things that go wrong. Again, this is another description that I'm like, I feel like it's a little spoilery, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But if that premise sounds interesting, this might be one to keep your eye on, especially if you're like me and you really enjoy kind of the mashup of different genres like that. Also on the 8th, we have The Secret Market of the Dead by Giovanni Di Feo. And this is a fantasy, a historical fantasy that is set in, I believe it is Naples. Yes, the 18th century town of Naples. So historical fantasy set in Italy, about a world where we do have a secret night market of the dead. I feel like I've played several video games that have kind of that exact plot line. I mostly chose this one because I think it has a really gorgeous cover design. I just think it's really pretty. I don't know if it's one I'm going to get to, but it says, an Italian-inspired Gothic historical fantasy debut in which a young woman, competing with her twin brother to inherit the family forge, finds her power in the nocturnal world that lurks beneath her own. I think it sounds intriguing. So I'm going to wait for some reviews, but I think this is one to kind of keep an eye on. Okay, moving on to the 15th of July, we actually have what is probably my most anticipated book of the month. And I'm sure the most anticipated book for a lot of you because it's already been delayed, and that is A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandanna. This author wrote The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which is a kind of almost like a rom-com style romantasy, which is not a thing that we see a lot. Romantasy tends to be very dramatic, shall we say. But this one felt like a rom-com to me. It was cute, it was sweet, it was kind of funny. I had a good time. It was heartwarming. It was cozy, but it still had a plot. It was just kind of a thing that I was into. So when I saw that she was writing a new book and it involved a magical inn and that she has some kind of a snarky magical fox companion, I was like, yeah, no, I feel like this is a thing I'm going to enjoy. And then it was delayed. I think it was supposed to come out almost a year ago, but here we are. And it is actually coming out this month. I am definitely going to be reading this one. I do a new release vlog every month, so stick around if you want to see me read that one and probably 2 or 3 other books that are on this list. I'll have that up at the end of July, but this one is definitely going on it. The description is amazing. It says, Sarah Swan used to be one of the most powerful witches in Britain. Then she resurrected her great aunt Jasmine from the, very recently, dead, lost most of her magic, befriended a semi-villainous talking fox, and was exiled from the guild. Now she has to help her great aunt Jasmine run an enchanted inn in Lancashire, where she deals with her quirky guests' shenanigans, tries to keep said talking fox in check, and longs for the future that seems lost to her. There is, of course, there's a romance. There's an icy magical historian, is what it says, who's going to be visiting. And, obviously she's going to figure out some stuff. I don't know. I don't really need to know more than that. I think it sounds cute. And I think I'm not somebody that reads a lot of like regular romance that's just romance every once in a while, sure. But this year I have read 0 that I had a good time with. But this is going to be my summer beach read, I guess, if you want to put it that way, although I'm not going to any beaches. But I think it sounds good. And then we also have on the 15th, this is another book that is definitely on my TBR, and it is The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Silvia Moreno Garcia is an extremely prolific writer, and she's very good at writing these stories that bend genres. So I read Mexican Gothic by her. It's not my absolute favorite book, but it's a really interesting kind of fantasy horror, almost kind of like existential nature dread. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a strange book, and it gets recommended a lot. And I'm always like, that was a weird book. So this one says 3 women in 3 different eras encounter danger and witchcraft in this eerie multi-generational horror saga. And it starts with a quote, "Back then, when I was a young woman, there were still witches." That was how Nana Alba always began the stories she told her great-granddaughter Minerva, stories that have stayed with her all her life. So Minerva is a graduate student. She's writing her thesis about the papers of this woman who has come before. This is a very kind of common setup, I feel like, in books that usually works for me. I generally love a story that is told in these different time periods because we're looking at a manuscript or a story told by somebody before. So anyway, witches. Witches are having a moment. There are so many witch books on this list. I have not even gotten to all of the witch books yet, but I think this one sounds really good, and I am definitely going to be reading it. And speaking of witch books, we have another witch book also on the 15th. That's 3 witch books on July 15th, if you're keeping count. We have A Resistance of Witches by Morgan Ryan. And this one has one of the craziest premise on this list. This is the story of a group of witches during World War II who fight on the side of the Allies to try and stop powerful magical artifacts from falling into the hands of the evil regime. Okay, so it's historical fiction. Historical fiction's World War II, witches on both sides. I think it sounds crazy, in a good way. In a good way. I would definitely check this one out. It's either going to be amazing or it's going to be ridiculous, or some combination of the two. I'm not really sure, but when I saw that description, I was like, that is certainly unique. There is a fantasy author who has a series that I'm thinking of that has kind of a similar premise. I think it's Ian Tregelles. If I remember what the book is, I'll put it up here so you can see, but I have read that series, and this kind of reminded me of that, although I'm sure it's quite different. But anyway, interested in that. And now we are on to the 22nd. On the 22nd of July, we have Volatile Memory by Seth Haddon. This is a sci-fi novella being published by Tor.com, like so many novellas. And it's described as Ex Machina meets This Is How You Lose the Time War. It's a heart-filled, vengeful, sapphic sci-fi action-adventure novella. That's a lot of words. I really love This Is How You Lose the Time War. But every time I see a book that includes This Is How You Lose the Time War as a comp, it usually is nothing like This Is How You Lose the Time War. Usually it's just that it was sapphic, and that's not my takeaway from Time War. So we'll ignore that for now. But I do think this sounds really interesting. And it says, with nothing but a limping ship and an outdated mask to her name, Wyla needs a big payday. When the call goes out that a lucrative piece of tech is waiting on a nearby planet, she relies on all the swiftness of her prey animal instincts to beat other hunters to it. So I think it's a little bit of a bounty hunter kind of situation, kind of an artifact hunter, which is very common in sci-fi. I think that sounds interesting. I've never read anything by this author, and I do love a novella. So at some point, I might possibly get to this one. This is one that I definitely thought the description was spoilery, especially for a novella. I did not read you the whole thing. It seems like there might be a twist in here that is revealed in the description, and I would not. If it sounds good to you, I would check it out. And then we are still on the 22nd, and we have another book that I think sounds really, really good that I already read the sample chapter for, that I am seriously considering reading. I don't know if it's going to be in July, and that is The Library at Hellebore by Cassandra Khaw. I've never read anything by Cassandra Khaw, but I have really been struck by the premise of several of her earlier novels and by the covers. They always have great covers. And this one is a dark academia horror story, and is kind of giving me vibes of A Deadly Education or the Scholomance series based on the description, which I'm going to read for you. And I love that. The Hellebore Technical Institute for the Gifted is the premier academy for the dangerous. The Antichrist and Ragnaroks, the World Eaters, and the Apocalypse Makers. Hellebore promises redemption, acceptance, and a normal life after graduation. At least, that's what Alessa Lee is told when she's kidnapped and forcibly enrolled. But there's more than meets the eye. On graduation day, the faculty go on a ravenous rampage, feasting on her class. Only Alessa and a group of her classmates escape the carnage. Trapped in the school's library, they must offer a human sacrifice every night, or else the faculty will break down the door and kill everyone. Can they band together and survive, or will the faculty eat its fill? That's some dark academia, like turned up to 11, right? I think the premise sounds great. Just like so interesting. It's also not super long. I think it's definitely under 300 pages. And I'm really feeling like this is one I'm going to want to read. As I said, possibly not in July because I don't think I'm going to be in the mood for scary books in July. It's still too hot outside. But this fall, this feels like a great fall book. And we have made it to the 29th, and we have Silver Cloak by L.K. Stephen. I really love this cover. I think it's just a super striking black and white, kind of simplistic cover, different from, I feel like, what usually you see. This is the first book in an adult fantasy trilogy, and it says, in this addictive new fantasy series set in a world where magic is fueled by pleasure and pain, an obsessive detective infiltrates a brutal gang of dark mages, knowing that one wrong move will get her killed. And L.K. Stevens is another pen name of Laura Steven, who wrote Our Infinite Fates, which I know came out earlier this year. I have not read that book because I think that the premise didn't sound super interesting to me, but this one kind of does. And like I said, I love the cover and I love that it's an adult fantasy series. I actually initially thought it was young adult, but it definitely says adult fantasy series. So anyway, I'm going to be checking that out at some point, probably. We'll see. I'm probably going to wait on a couple of reviews to see if it's something feels like I'm going to be interested in. I have so many books on my TBR, but I do think it sounds interesting. And we have a few more. There are so many books coming out at the end of July. The Lighthouse at the Edge of the World by J.K. Dawson. This is a fantasy. I think it kind of has a little bit of a Midnight Library vibe to it, or possibly maybe something like The House in the Cerulean Sea, although that's a little more heartwarming than I think this sounds, but maybe. It says, at the edge of Chicago, nestled on the shores of Lake Michigan, there is a way station for the dead. Every night, the newly departed travel through the city to the station, guided by its lighthouse. There, they reckon with their lives before stepping aboard a boat to go beyond. Nera has spent decades watching her father, the ferryman of the dead, sail across the lake, but tonight something is different. The lighthouse is flickered out. Ghostly haunts have multiplied in the city, and now a living person has found her way onto the boat, and she's searching for someone lost. It's a really intriguing premise, and I think it sounds good. It says it's a moving and emotional story of magic, family, and those who leave us alone, but who might not remain lost. It could be very heartwarming, and sometimes a heartwarming story is what I am in the mood for. So we'll see. And I have, I think, two more. We have The Memory Hunters by Mia Tsai, which is described as Inception meets Indiana Jones, which is a lot. It is a propulsive fungal science fantasy following a headstrong academic and her equally stubborn bodyguard as they unearth an ancient secret that rocks the foundation of their society and challenges their unspoken love for one another. So I think it's a romantasy. It does mention science fantasy, and I don't know how to mash those three words together. So we're just going to go with romantasy. I haven't read anything by this author, and I do think it sounds interesting. Again, probably not one that I'm going to get to until I see some reviews, see what other people think, but I thought I would put it on here because I wanted to remember it. And then we have one more book, and that book is a sequel, and it is A Theory of Dreaming by Ava Reid. It is the sequel to A Study in Drowning, which was one of my favorite books when I read it a couple of years ago. Study in Drowning is a young adult romantasy that is about the power of stories and the way that we allow them to shape our world. And that's kind of non-specific, but we are following a couple who naturally are going to fall in love because it is a young adult romantasy, but I really loved it. I thought that it was perfect and sweet, and it had a lot to say that was deeper than I was expecting when I went into it, in particular about gender roles, about, again, as I said, the role of myth and literature within the society in the book, but also our society in real life. I thought it was great. Do I think it needed a sequel? I kind of don't, but I did ask for the arc because I saw it and I was like, well, but maybe. So I'm going to find out because I am definitely going to be reading this. I don't know if it's going to be in my July vlog or if I'm going to push that to August just because it comes out so late in the month and I don't know that I want to get to it that early, but we will see. But I am definitely planning to read that. I have a sad history of not liking books that are sequels to books that I initially thought were going to be standalones. So I've got some trepidation there, but we will see. I am definitely going to be trying it and I will let you know what I think. Okay, and that is all the books that are coming out in July that caught my eye. As I said, I don't think that it's a great month if you're into epic fantasy, as I sometimes am. There just was not a lot. We had a lot of books that are kind of more introspective. We had a lot of books about witches. Apparently there are a lot of witch books that come out in July. A couple of sci-fis that sound interesting, but not as much sci-fi as I would like. I'm always going to be complaining that there are not enough science fiction books being published compared to fantasy. So much fantasy. And a couple of horror or horror adjacent books that I also think sound really good. So if you enjoyed this and you like this kind of thing, go ahead, consider subscribing because I do these every single month along with my new release vlogs. I love reading new books. I love telling you all about the new books that are coming out. I have definitely found some hidden gems from forcing myself to go through really long lists of everything coming out from the publishers that month so that I can prepare this list for you. And I just have a really great time. So if you have enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like and leave me a comment and let me know what books you are most excited to read in July. Let me know if I left out a book that's coming out that you're really excited about. I would love to hear about it, particularly if you've got any good mysteries for me, because I get overwhelmed by the number of mysteries coming out every month, and I would love to have some of those to add to my TBR. And if you're feeling quiet but want to let me know that you were here, go ahead and leave me the broom emoji in honor of all of the witch books that we have coming out in July. And I hope that you all have a fantastic day. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.